Adrienne Matthews never thought she would see her name on a Fortune 500 list. Growing up in Detroit, she watched her mother work 3 jobs just to keep their small apartment. Her mom cleaned offices at night, worked at a grocery store during the day, and did laundry for neighbors on weekends. Money was always tight, but her mother had one rule that never changed. Education comes first, no matter what. Adrienne was different from other kids in her neighborhood. While they played outside, she stayed inside reading books about inventors and scientists. She was fascinated by how things worked. When she was 12, she took apart an old radio she found in the trash. Her mother was angry at first, thinking she had broken something valuable. But when Adrienne put it back together, and it worked even better than before, her mother realized her daughter had a special gift. High school was tough. Adrienne was one of only 3 black students in her advanced science classes. Some teachers treated her like she didn't belong there. They would skip over her raised hand and call on other students instead. But Adrienne never gave up. She studied harder than anyone else. She stayed after school every day to use the computer lab because they didn't have one at home. Her hard work paid off. She got a full scholarship to MIT, one of the best engineering schools in the country. Her mother cried when the acceptance letter came. It was the first time Adrienne had ever seen her mother cry happy tears. College was a whole new world. Adrienne had never been around so many smart people before. At first, she felt like she didn't fit in. Her classmates talked about their parents' jobs at big companies and their summer homes. Adrienne had never been on a vacation. But she quickly learned that being different wasn't a weakness. It was her strength. While her classmates focused on getting good grades, Adrienne was thinking about real problems that needed solving. She noticed that many buildings on campus wasted electricity. Lights stayed on in empty rooms all night. Air conditioning ran when windows were open. She started thinking about ways to make buildings smarter about using energy. For her senior project, Adrienne created a system that could learn how people used buildings. Her invention could predict when rooms would be empty and automatically turn off lights and air conditioning. It could save buildings up to 40% on their electric bills. Her professors were impressed, but Adrienne knew this was just the beginning. After graduation, she got job offers from several big companies. The salaries were good, and her mother wanted her to take the safe path. But Adrienne had a different dream. She wanted to start her own company. She wanted to take her energy-saving invention and make it available to everyone. Starting a business was harder than she expected. She moved back in with her mother to save money. She turned their garage into her workshop and office. Every morning, she would wake up at 5 to work on her invention before looking for investors during the day. Every evening she would come home and work until midnight, improving her designs and writing business plans. Finding investors was the hardest part. She went to hundreds of meetings over 2 years. Most investors were older white men who didn't understand her technology. Some of them asked her questions that had nothing to do with business. They wanted to know if she had built the system herself or if someone had helped her. They questioned whether there was really a market for her product. One investor told her that her idea was interesting, but maybe she should find a more experienced CEO to run the company. Another said that customers might be more comfortable buying from someone who looked more traditional. These comments hurt, but they also made Adrienne more determined to prove them wrong. The breakthrough came when she met Dr. Patricia Chun, a venture capitalist who specialized in clean technology. Dr. Chun was one of the few women investors in the field, and she understood what Adrienne was facing. She saw the potential in both the technology and the person behind it. Dr. Chun invested $2 million in Adrienne's company, which she named Technova Solutions. The name meant new technology, which was exactly what Adrienne wanted to create. With the investment money, she hired her first employees and moved out of her mother's garage into a real office. The first few years were intense. Adrienne worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week. She was the CEO, the head of engineering, and the sales team all at once. She installed her energy systems in small office buildings and apartment complexes. Word spread quickly about how much money her customers were saving on their electric bills. As Teknova grew, Adrienne faced new challenges. She had to learn how to manage people, negotiate contracts, and deal with competition from bigger companies. Some of her competitors tried to copy her technology, but Adrienne was always one step ahead. She kept improving her systems and finding new ways to save energy. By her 5th year in business, Teknova had customers in 20 states. Her systems were installed in hospitals, schools, shopping centers, and office buildings. The company was making $50 million in revenue each year. Adrienne was finally able to buy her mother a house and pay for her younger brother's college education. But Adrienne wasn't satisfied with just being successful. She wanted to change the world. She started working on new technology that could store energy from solar panels and wind turbines. This was a much bigger challenge than making buildings more efficient, but Adrienne believed it was the key to fighting climate change. Her energy storage technology was revolutionary. Unlike expensive batteries that most companies used, Adrienne's system was affordable and could store energy for weeks instead of just hours. Major utility companies started paying attention. They realized that Adrienne's technology could help them use more renewable energy and reduce pollution. Within 3 years, Teknova's revenue jumped from $50 million to over $1 billion. Adrienne became one of the youngest people ever to run a billion-dollar company. More importantly, she was one of only a handful of black women to achieve this milestone. Success brought new opportunities and new challenges. Adrienne was invited to speak at conferences around the world. She was featured on magazine covers and interviewed on television shows. But with fame came scrutiny. Some people questioned whether she deserved her success or if she had gotten help because of her race and gender. These comments bothered Adrienne, but they also reminded her of why her work was important. She wasn't just building a company. She was proving that anyone could succeed if they worked hard enough and never gave up on their dreams. That's when the Whitmore family reached out to her. The Whitmores owned one of the oldest and most respected companies in America. Whitmore Industries had been around for over 100 years and was worth $50 billion. They wanted to buy Teknova for $900 million. For Adrienne, this wasn't just about money. It was about recognition. The Whitmore family represented everything she had worked to achieve. They were respected, established, and connected to the most powerful people in business and politics. A partnership with them would validate everything. She had built and opened doors to even bigger opportunities. The initial meetings went well. The Whitmore family seemed impressed with her technology and her business results. They talked about keeping her as CEO and giving her resources to expand globally. It seemed like the perfect next step for Teknova and for Adrienne's career. But sometimes, things that seem perfect on the surface hide problems underneath. Adrienne was about to learn this lesson in the most painful way possible. The invitation to the Whitmore estate arrived on thick, cream-colored paper with gold lettering. Adrienne had never seen anything like it. The annual charity gala was one of the most exclusive events in the business world. Politicians, celebrities, and billionaires all gathered at the Whitmore family mansion to raise money for various causes. This year, they were supporting education programs for underprivileged children. Adrienne felt honored to be invited. The plan was simple. She would attend the gala, meet important people, and then sign the final contracts for the $900 million deal. Her legal team had reviewed everything multiple times. The paperwork was ready. All that remained was putting pen to paper and making the partnership official. She spent weeks preparing for the event. Adrienne bought a beautiful evening gown from a designer boutique. It was navy blue with subtle silver details, elegant but not flashy. She wanted to look professional and confident. Her stylist helped her choose jewelry that complemented the dress perfectly. Everything had to be just right for such an important evening. The night before the gala, Adrienne could barely sleep. She kept thinking about how far she had come. From her mother's garage to signing deals with one of America's most powerful families. She imagined calling her mother the next day with the good news. Her mom would be so proud. The Whitmore estate was even more impressive than Adrienne had expected. The mansion sat on over 100 acres of perfectly manicured grounds. A long driveway wound through gardens filled with flowers and fountains. Valet attendants in white uniforms took keys from guests as they arrived in expensive cars. Adrienne felt a little nervous as her driver pulled up to the entrance. Inside, the mansion was like something from a movie. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings. Oil paintings of Whitmore family ancestors covered the walls. Servers in formal uniforms carried trays of champagne and fancy appetizers. The guest list included senators, judges, famous actors, and CEOs of major corporations. At first, everything seemed to go well. Adrienne mingled with other guests, introducing herself and talking about Technova. People seemed genuinely interested in her story and her company's technology. She felt comfortable and confident. This was exactly the kind of networking opportunity she had hoped for. Then Victoria Whitmore approached her. Victoria was the family matriarch, a woman in her 70s who had been married to the Whitmore patriarch for over 50 years. She wore an expensive diamond necklace and carried herself with the authority of someone who had never been told no. Victoria was known for her charity work, but also for her very traditional views about business and society. Victoria smiled as she walked up to Adrienne, but something about the smile didn't feel genuine. It was the kind of smile people give when they're being polite, but don't really mean it. Victoria took Adrienne's arm and began leading her toward the center of the room where most of the guests were gathered. The room gradually became quiet as Victoria raised her hand for attention. Adrienne assumed this was part of the normal evening program. Maybe Victoria wanted to introduce her to the crowd as their new business partner. Adrienne straightened her shoulders and prepared to say a few words about Technova and their upcoming partnership. But that's not what happened at all. Victoria began speaking in a loud, clear voice that carried across the entire room. She talked about the Whitmore family's commitment to helping those less fortunate. She mentioned their scholarships for minority students and their programs to support small businesses owned by women and people of color. Then she gestured toward Adrienne. The words that came next felt like a physical blow. Victoria described Adrienne as their little charity case and talked about how the Whitmore family believed in giving opportunities to people like her. She spoke as if Adrienne was a beneficiary of their generosity rather than a successful CEO who had built a billion-dollar company. Adrienne felt her face grow hot with embarrassment and anger. The entire room was staring at her. She could see some guests looking uncomfortable, but others were nodding along with Victoria's words. She wanted to speak up, to correct the record, but she was so shocked that words wouldn't come. Things got worse when Charles Whitmore Jr. joined his mother. Charles was Victoria's oldest son and the current president of Whitmore Industries. He was a man in his 50s who had inherited his position rather than earning it. He had attended the best schools and had every advantage in life, but he had never started a company from scratch or struggled to find investors. Charles took the microphone from his mother and continued the introduction. He talked about how the Whitmore family wanted to help young entrepreneurs learn the ropes of big business. He suggested that Adrienne would benefit greatly from their guidance and experience. The way he spoke made it sound like she was a student, rather than an equal partner. When Adrienne finally found her voice and tried to address the crowd, Charles interrupted her. He held up his hand and said something about letting the grown-ups handle the business discussion. The comment drew uncomfortable laughter from some guests, but it made Adrienne's blood boil. The final humiliation came when Charles began questioning Adrienne's background in front of everyone. He asked whether she had really built Technova herself, or if she had received special help from diversity programs. He wondered aloud if her success was due to her hard work and intelligence, or if companies had given her contracts because they needed to meet diversity requirements. These questions were not just insulting, they were completely inappropriate for a public setting. Charles was essentially suggesting that Adrienne's success wasn't legitimate. He was implying that she was only successful because of her race and gender, not because of her abilities or achievements. The room fell completely silent. Adrienne could feel hundreds of eyes staring at her, waiting to see how she would respond. Some guests looked shocked by Charles's behavior. Others seemed to be enjoying the spectacle. A few people were holding up phones, recording everything that was happening. Adrienne's mind was racing. She wanted to defend herself, to list her achievements and credentials. She wanted to remind everyone that she had graduated from MIT, that she had built a billion-dollar company from nothing, that she had revolutionized energy storage technology. But she also realized that anything she said would likely be twisted against her. Instead, she maintained her composure. Years of dealing with discrimination and skepticism had taught her how to control her emotions in difficult situations. She smiled politely and thanked the Whitmore family for their kind words. Her voice was steady, but inside she was furious. The rest of the evening felt like a nightmare. Adrienne tried to continue networking and acting normal, but she could feel people staring at her and whispering. Some guests approached her with what seemed like genuine sympathy, but others treated her differently after Victoria and Charles's introduction. They spoke to her in condescending tones, as if she was a child rather than a successful CEO. During dinner, Adrienne was seated at a table far from the main stage, despite being one of the evening's supposed guests of honor. The conversation around her table was awkward, with people seeming unsure how to treat her after what had happened earlier. The worst part was watching videos of the incident, spreading on social media in real time. Guests had recorded Victoria and Charles's comments and were already posting them online. Adrienne could see the clips being shared and reshared, with people commenting about the treatment she had received. By the time the evening ended, Adrienne felt emotionally drained. The contract she was supposed to sign remained unsigned in her briefcase. The Whitmore family seemed to expect that the business would proceed as planned, despite what had happened. They acted as if their behavior was perfectly normal and acceptable. As Adrienne left the mansion that night, she realized that everything had changed. The partnership she had been so excited about now felt like a trap. She had to decide whether her company's future was worth accepting such disrespectful treatment, or if some things were more important than money. Adrienne barely slept that night. She kept replaying the evening over and over in her mind. Every word Victoria and Charles had said felt like a knife cutting deeper each time she remembered it. She had faced discrimination before, but never so publicly, and never from people she was supposed to be partnering with. At 3 a.m, her phone started buzzing with notifications. At first, she ignored it, thinking it was just work emails or news alerts. But the buzzing didn't stop. It got more and more frequent until it sounded like her phone was having a breakdown. When she finally picked it up, her heart sank. The first thing she saw was a video clip with over 50,000 views. It was her, standing in that beautiful mansion, while Victoria Whitmore called her a charity case, and Charles questioned whether she had really built her company herself. The video had been posted by someone who attended the gala. The caption read, "Is this how we treat successful black women in 2025? Within the first hour, it had been shared hundreds of times. People were commenting, expressing their shock and anger at what they were seeing. By 6 a.m, Adrienne's phone was completely overwhelmed. She had thousands of notifications from Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. People were tagging her in posts, sharing their own stories of discrimination, and expressing support for her situation. But there were also negative comments from people who believed she was overreacting or playing the victim. The hashtag that really took off was Respect Black Women. It started with just a few posts, but within hours, it was trending nationwide. Women of all backgrounds were sharing their own experiences of being disrespected in professional settings. They talked about being interrupted in meetings, having their ideas stolen, or being treated like they didn't belong in boardrooms. Adrienne's assistant called her at 7 in the morning, her voice filled with panic. The office phones were ringing, non-stop with calls from reporters wanting interviews. News websites were already running stories about the incident. The headline on one major business publication read, "Tech CEO humiliated at elite charity gala, video goes viral." By 9 in the morning, Adrienne realized this was much bigger than she had expected. Her story wasn't just being shared by random people on social media. Major news networks were picking it up. Business journalists who covered corporate America were writing opinion pieces about racism in elite business circles. The support was overwhelming but also complicated. Civil rights leaders were calling the incident a perfect example of how successful black professionals are still treated as outsiders. Business school professors were using it as a case study about workplace discrimination. Some politicians were even making statements about the need for better diversity and inclusion practices in corporate America, but the support came with pressure. Everyone seemed to expect Adrienne to become a spokesperson for every black woman who had ever faced discrimination in business. People wanted her to give interviews, write articles, and speak at conferences about her experience. They wanted her to turn her personal humiliation into a public crusade. The hardest part was reading all the stories from other women who had gone through similar experiences. Adrienne received hundreds of direct messages from professionals who shared their own stories of being belittled, dismissed, or treated as tokens rather than equals. Many of them thanked her for bringing attention to issues they had faced in silence for years. One message particularly stuck with her. It was from a young black woman who had just graduated from business school. She wrote, "Seeing what happened to you makes me scared about my own future. If someone as successful as you can be treated that way, what hope do the rest of us have?" That message broke Adrienne's heart. She realized that her response to this situation would send a message to young professionals who looked up to her. If she accepted the Whitmore family's treatment and went ahead with the deal, she would be telling them that success requires tolerating disrespect. But if she walked away, she would be showing them that dignity and self-respect are more important than money. Meanwhile, the Whitmore family was dealing with their own crisis. Their social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. People were calling for boycotts of Whitmore Industries and its products. Several high-profile clients were publicly questioning whether they wanted to continue doing business with a company whose leadership had such outdated attitudes. The Whitmore family's response only made things worse. They issued a statement through their public relations team that read, "The comments made at last night's charity gala were intended to highlight our commitment to diversity and inclusion. We regret that our words were misunderstood and taken out of context. We have the utmost respect for all our business partners." The statement felt like a slap in the face to Adrienne and everyone who supported her. They weren't apologizing for their behavior. They were claiming that people had misunderstood their good intentions. They were acting like the problem wasn't what they said, but how people had interpreted it. Social media users weren't buying it. The weak apology only made people angrier. More videos from the gala started surfacing, showing other moments where the Whitmore family had made inappropriate comments. It became clear that their treatment of Adrienne wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of behavior. By the weekend, Adrienne's story had become national news. She was featured on the front pages of major newspapers. Television news programs were discussing the incident and what it revealed about racism in corporate America. Business magazines were running cover stories about discrimination in boardrooms. The attention was both helpful and overwhelming. On one hand, it brought awareness to important issues that many people had ignored or overlooked. On the other hand, it turned Adrienne's personal experience into a public spectacle. She couldn't go anywhere without being recognized and asked for comments about the situation. Her legal team was getting nervous. They reminded her that walking away from the Whitmore deal would have serious financial consequences. Technova had already spent money on legal fees, due diligence, and preparation for the merger. If she backed out now, the company could face lawsuits and penalties worth millions of dollars. But money wasn't the only consideration. Other business leaders were watching how Adrienne handled the situation. Some of them reached out privately to express support, but others were more cautious. They worried that associating with her might bring unwanted attention to their own companies. The most surprising development came on Sunday evening. Adrienne received a call from David Morrison, the CEO of Morrison Global, one of Whitmore Industries' biggest competitors. Morrison Global was known for having progressive leadership and strong diversity programs. David told Adrienne that his company had been following her story with great interest. He said that Morrison Global had been looking for opportunities to expand into clean energy technology, and they were impressed with what Technova had accomplished. He wanted to know if she would be interested in exploring a partnership with them instead of the Whitmores. The conversation lasted over an hour. David asked thoughtful questions about her technology and her business model. He treated her as an equal partner rather than someone who needed guidance or charity. Most importantly, he made it clear that any deal would be based purely on business merits, not on diversity goals or public relations benefits. When Adrienne hung up the phone, she felt something she hadn't experienced in days: hope. Maybe walking away from the Whitmore deal wouldn't be the end of her expansion plans. Maybe it would be the beginning of something even better. But first, she had to make the hardest business decision of her career. She had to choose between financial security and personal dignity. She had to decide whether she was willing to risk everything she had built to stand up for what she believed was right. Monday morning came too quickly. Adrienne hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a time all weekend. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of the people at the gala, heard Victoria's condescending voice, or felt the weight of all the social media attention pressing down on her. She arrived at the Technova offices before sunrise. The building was quiet and peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos that had taken over her life. She made herself a cup of coffee and sat in her corner office, staring out at the city as it slowly woke up. In a few hours, she would have to face her board of directors and make a decision that could change everything. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 10 in the morning. Adrienne had called it on Sunday night after her conversation with David Morrison from Morrison Global. She knew her board members had been following the news coverage, and they would have strong opinions about what she should do next. Before the meeting, Adrienne spent time reviewing Technova's financial situation. The company was doing well, but the Whitmore deal represented a huge opportunity for growth. With their resources and connections, Technova could expand into international markets and develop new technologies much faster than they could on their own. Walking away from $900 million wasn't a decision anyone could make lightly. That money could fund research for years, create hundreds of new jobs, and help Technova become a global leader in clean energy technology. It was the kind of opportunity that most entrepreneurs only dream about. But there was more at stake than just money. Adrienne thought about her employees, especially the young women and people of color who worked for Technova. What message would she send them if she accepted the Whitmore family's treatment? Would they think that success required tolerating disrespect and discrimination? The board members started arriving at 9:30. There were 7 people on Technova's board, including Adrienne herself. 3 of them were early investors who had believed in her vision when others wouldn't. 2 were industry experts with decades of experience in technology and clean energy. 1 was Dr. Patricia Chun, the venture capitalist who had given Adrienne her first major investment. The last was Robert Williams, a retired executive who had built and sold several successful companies. As they gathered in the conference room, Adrienne could see the tension on their faces. This wasn't a normal board meeting about quarterly reports or strategic planning. This was about the future of the company and everyone's investment in it. Dr. Chin spoke first. She had been following the news coverage closely and understood both the business implications and the personal impact on Adrienne. She pointed out that the viral attention had actually increased Technova's visibility in ways that money couldn't buy. Potential customers and partners around the world now knew about the company and its technology, but she also acknowledged the financial risks of walking away from the Whitmore deal. The legal penalties could be substantial, and there was no guarantee that other opportunities would emerge. Dr. Chun said she would support whatever decision Adrienne made, but she wanted to make sure all the consequences were clearly understood. Robert Williams had a different perspective. He had been in business for over 40 years and had seen how personal emotions could cloud business judgment. He argued that Adrienne should focus on what was best for Technova and its employees, not on her personal feelings about the Whitmore family's behavior. Robert reminded everyone that business partnerships weren't about friendship or personal compatibility. They were about creating value for shareholders and customers. He suggested that Adrienne could use her position within Whitmore Industries to create positive change from the inside, rather than walking away and losing influence. The other board members were split between these two viewpoints. Some felt that accepting the deal would be seen as endorsing the Whitmore family's behavior and could damage Technova's reputation with customers who valued diversity and inclusion. Others worried that turning down such a lucrative opportunity would be irresponsible to shareholders and employees. The discussion went on for over 3 hours. Board members shared their concerns, asked tough questions, and debated the pros and cons of both options. Some of the conversations got heated, with people raising their voices and interrupting each other. Everyone had strong opinions, and no one wanted to make the wrong choice. During a break in the meeting, Adrienne walked to her office and called her mother. She hadn't spoken to her mom since before the gala, and she needed to hear a familiar voice. Her mother had seen the news coverage and was both proud and worried about her daughter. Her mother listened as Adrienne explained the situation and the difficult choice she faced. When Adrienne finished talking, her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that cut straight to the heart of the matter. "Baby, you didn't build this company so you could be somebody else's charity case. You built it to prove that you belong at any table you choose to sit at." Those words stayed with Adrienne as she returned to the board meeting. Her mother was right. Technova wasn't just a business to her. It was proof that she could succeed on her own terms, without compromising her values or accepting less than she deserved. The afternoon session of the board meeting focused on practical considerations. The legal team joined by video conference to explain the potential penalties for backing out of the Whitmore deal. The financial team presented projections showing how the company could continue growing without the merger, though at a slower pace. Then Adrienne shared her conversation with David Morrison from Morrison Global. She explained that they had expressed serious interest in a partnership and wanted to schedule formal discussions. This news changed the dynamic of the conversation significantly. Walking away from Whitmore wouldn't necessarily mean walking away from expansion opportunities. Several board members were intrigued by the Morrison Global possibility. The company had an excellent reputation and resources that were comparable to Whitmore Industries. More importantly, Their initial approach had been respectful and professional, treating Adrienne as an equal partner rather than a beneficiary of their generosity. As the day wore on, Adrienne realized that the board meeting had become less about convincing her board members and more about clarifying her own thoughts. She had been so focused on the business implications that she hadn't fully considered what this decision meant for her personally and for her company's values. Technova had always been more than just a technology company. From the beginning, Adrienne had tried to create a workplace where everyone felt valued and respected regardless of their background. She had hired diverse teams, promoted based on merit, and refused to tolerate discrimination in any form. If she accepted the Whitmore family's treatment and moved forward with their deal, what would that say about her commitment to those values? How could she ask her employees to stand up against discrimination if she wasn't willing to do the same thing herself? By 6 p.m, the board members were exhausted but had reached a consensus. They would support whatever decision Adrienne made, as long as she could articulate clear reasons for her choice and a plan for moving forward. They trusted her judgment and her commitment to the company's success. After the board members left, Adrienne sat alone in the conference room, surrounded by empty coffee cups and pages of notes. The building was quiet again, and she could hear her own heartbeat in the silence. Tomorrow she would have to announce her decision to the world. She would have to choose between financial opportunity and personal dignity, between playing it safe and standing up for what she believed was right. As she gathered her papers and prepared to leave, Adrienne already knew what she was going to do. The conversation with her mother had crystallized something that had been building inside her all weekend. She had worked too hard and come too far to accept being treated as anything less than an equal. Technova would survive and thrive, with or without the Whitmore family's money. Tuesday morning felt different. Adrienne woke up before her alarm, but for the first time in days, she felt rested. The weight of uncertainty was gone. She had made her decision, and now it was time to act on it. She dressed carefully in a navy blue suit that made her feel confident and professional. Today wasn't just about making an announcement. It was about taking control of her story and showing the world what leadership really looked like. She ate breakfast slowly, reading through her prepared remarks one last time before heading to the office. The Technova building was buzzing with activity. News trucks were already parked outside, and reporters were setting up cameras on the sidewalk. Her assistant had scheduled the press conference for 11 a.m, giving major news networks time to broadcast it live. This wasn't just a business announcement anymore. It had become a national story about values, respect, and the price of dignity. Adrienne spent the morning in meetings with her leadership team, making sure everyone understood what was about to happen. She explained her decision to each department head individually, answering their questions and addressing their concerns. Some of them were nervous about the financial implications, but most expressed support for her choice. The most emotional conversation was with the company's Diversity and Inclusion Committee. These were employees who had joined Technova specifically because they believed in Adrienne's vision of creating an inclusive workplace. Many of them were young professionals who saw her as a role model and mentor. When she told them about her decision to walk away from the Whitmore deal, several people started crying. Not from sadness, but from relief and pride. One employee, a young engineer who had graduated from college just 2 years earlier, said it perfectly. "You're showing us that we don't have to accept being treated badly just to get ahead. That means everything to us." At 10:30, Adrienne made her way to the main conference room where the press conference would be held. Her hands were steady as she reviewed her notes one final time. She had practiced her speech until she could deliver it without looking at the paper, but she wanted the security of having her key points written down. The room was packed with reporters from business magazines, television networks, and online publications. Camera crews had set up equipment to broadcast the event live. Adrienne could see Technova employees gathered in the hallway outside, watching through the glass doors. Many of them had taken time off from their work to witness this moment. As she approached the podium, Adrienne felt the same calm confidence she had experienced when presenting her technology to investors years earlier. This was just another presentation, another opportunity to explain her vision and values to an audience. The only difference was that this time, the entire country was watching. She began by thanking everyone for their interest in Teknova and their support over the past few days. She acknowledged that the events at the Whitmore Charity Gala had sparked important conversations about respect and equality in business. Then she got to the heart of her announcement. Adrienne explained that after careful consideration with her board of directors, Teknova would not be moving forward with the proposed merger with Whitmore Industries. She said that while the financial opportunity was significant, her company's values were not negotiable. Teknova was built on principles of respect, equality, and innovation, and any partnership had to align with those principles. The room was completely silent as she spoke. Reporters stopped taking notes and just listened. Camera operators focused, their lenses on her face, capturing every word and expression. Even the Teknova employees in the hallway seemed to be holding their breath. But Adrienne wasn't finished. She had more news to share. She announced that Teknova had entered into preliminary discussions with Morrison Global about a potential partnership. She explained that Morrison Global had approached them with a proposal that respected their independence while providing resources for international expansion. The details she shared were impressive. Morrison Global was offering $1.2 billion, significantly more than the Whitmore deal. More importantly, the terms allowed Teknova to maintain its identity and values while gaining access to global markets. Adrienne would remain as CEO with full operational control, and Teknova's commitment to diversity and innovation would be preserved. When she finished her prepared remarks, Adrienne opened the floor to questions. The first reporter asked about the financial penalties of walking away from the Whitmore deal. Adrienne acknowledged that there would be costs, but said that some things were more valuable than money. She explained that Teknova's reputation and values were worth more than any short-term financial loss. Another reporter asked whether she thought her decision would encourage other business leaders to take similar stands. Adrienne said she hoped it would, but emphasized that every situation was different. She wasn't trying to tell other people what to do. She was simply doing what felt right for her company and her employees. The most challenging question came from a business journalist who suggested that Adrienne was being overly sensitive and that successful entrepreneurs needed to have thicker skin. The room tensed as everyone waited for her response. Adrienne took a deep breath and looked directly at the reporter. She said that there was a difference between having thick skin and accepting disrespectful treatment. She explained that successful leaders needed to know when to compromise and when to stand firm. This was a moment that required standing firm. She pointed out that expecting people to tolerate discrimination in order to succeed was exactly the kind of thinking that needed to change. Business partnerships should be based on mutual respect and shared goals, not on one party accepting inferior treatment for financial gain. The press conference lasted for 45 minutes. By the time it ended, videos of Adrienne's announcement were already spreading across social media. The hashtag #RespectBlackWomen, which had started after the gala incident, began trending again, as people shared clips of her speech and expressed support for her decision. The market reaction was immediate and positive. Teknova's stock price, which had dropped slightly after the gala incident, surged 15% within hours of the press conference. Investors were impressed by Adrienne's leadership and confident in the company's future under the Morrison Global partnership. Meanwhile, Whitmore Industries faced a very different reaction. Their stock dropped 8% as investors worried about the company's reputation and leadership. Several major clients announced that they were reviewing their relationships with Whitmore Industries. The family's charity foundation saw donations decrease as donors expressed concerns about the organization's values. Over the following weeks, the contrast between the two companies became even more stark. Technova received inquiries from potential customers around the world who wanted to work with a company that stood up for its values. Talented engineers and business professionals reached out about job opportunities. Attracted by Adrienne's leadership and the company's principles, the partnership with Morrison Global moved forward quickly. Within a month, they had signed a formal agreement that gave Technova access to international markets while preserving its independence. The deal included funding for 3 new research facilities and plans to hire over 500 new employees. 6 months later, Adrienne was invited to speak at a business leadership conference. As she stood on the stage, looking out at an audience of executives and entrepreneurs, she reflected on how much had changed since that night at the Whitmore estate. She talked about the importance of knowing your values and being willing to defend them, even when it's difficult or expensive. She explained that true success wasn't just about financial achievement, but about building something meaningful that you could be proud of. The speech received a standing ovation, but what meant the most to Adrienne were the conversations afterward. Young professionals, especially women and people of color, thanked her for showing them that they didn't have to choose between success and self-respect. They told her that her example had given them courage to stand up for themselves in their own careers. As she flew home that evening, Adrienne realized that walking away from the Whitmore deal had been the best business decision she had ever made. Not because of the financial outcome, although that had worked out better than expected, but because it had shown her employees, her industry, and herself what kind of leader she really was.